Let's get up. Nice to meet you all. I'm glad to be here. So I was going to talk about how you're not really the target. You literally are not the target, and what we really do with your data once we kind of put it all together. So big data, right? This is the term that everyone's talking about. It kind of started to become super popular around 2010, 2011. I had always worked in big data and didn't know that that's what I was doing until I started reading articles, and I was like, oh, that's what I do, right? But it's super funny because I talked to some of my friends who have their PhD in life sciences or microbiology, and they're like, do you know how much data is involved in microbiology? Like, why is this new now? And the reality is that big data is really, when we're talking about it, most of the time, we're really talking about behavioral data about people, and that's what's new and different. Because of cloud computing, because of the ease of now not a huge sink of money to buy servers, and the fact that you can rent servers, specifically campaigns, which are these very short-lived organizations, now there can be a lot of analysis about people and what they do over time. So that brings up the question of kind of what's creepy, what's not. And this word is super interesting, right? Like, what does creepy mean? It kind of just means something that like makes you feel icky. It isn't necessarily icky. It just might make you feel icky because you don't understand it. It's also something that's become more popular over time as a word that we use. Sometimes it just means like that person at the bar was standing too close to me and it made me feel creepy, right? But it's definitely a word that's correlated with privacy. Right? And when people are talking about it and what's creepy, they're also kind of saying that their privacy feels like it's being invaded. But privacy is a complicated word. It's untranslatable. How I define it and how you define it are very different things. There's not a clear-cut word of what privacy is because it's super personal, right? So, I live in a house and, there's a park across the street from me, and so it's pretty much a block away that there's another building. So for me, walking between my bathroom, my bedroom, my living room, like, I don't worry about closing the blinds. Like, I'm fine. My mom comes over and she thinks I'm insane, right? Like, she's like closing curtains all over the place, right? Like, our levels of comfort are different in this scenario. So people really, if you haven't read the book, Privacy and Freedom, by Alan Weston, you definitely should. I think he's one of the best thinkers on the topic. He's no longer here, but what I find really interesting about him is he doesn't go over to one way. He realizes that there's a balance. And so people need to feel privacy, but they also need to feel socially engaged. Platforms like Facebook and Twitter and all social media would not exist if people were obsessed with privacy and that was their number one concern. So it's about identifying ourselves and doing things, but also making sure that we don't feel like someone is invading our space too much, right? So Alan Weston describes 4 modes of privacy and what it really means. And so I think it's useful to think about each level of privacy. So one of it is solitude. Like, we all as human beings need time to feel alone, to feel like no one else is around us, to like lock ourselves in a room and not talk to anyone and not feel like the world is like putting all of their stuff on us, right? Advertising doesn't really affect this. Campaigns, though, in some ways you could argue could. There's a voter file. You get lists. You decide who it is that you want to talk to. You show up on their door and knock on it, right? Maybe they're having a moment of solitude. Well, doorbells are there, and people can kind of invade this, right? But in general, this is a state that most people do not want to be in all the time. It's a very, very limited space, and it's not really a concern when we're talking about the issues that we're talking about. So intimacy is the second mode of privacy, and this is more common, right? Most people like small, intimate groups, and they feel more comfortable talking within small, intimate groups and sharing their real feelings without holding back as much, whereas when the room gets larger and larger and larger, our fake personas kind of start to come out a little bit more, and we're worried about how we're presenting ourselves, and we don't want strangers to get the wrong idea about what it is that we're saying, right? But again, this kind of can sometimes feel creepy, right? If you think that you're in a private space, like an email chain between you and someone else, and then there's side ads that seem quite relevant to what it is that you're talking about in that conversation, right? So that feels like it's invading your personal, small, intimate space, even though it's just an algorithm doing this. The core thing, though, is anonymity, which I can't say. But this is, no one wants to feel like they're being surveillanced, right? So I go to a ball game, and all of a sudden we're sitting there, and they put up a number that how many people were at that ball game. Like, there's no riots in the street over this, right? Like, everyone's fine with the going through the thing and a little ticker going up and like people being like, in this place, this is how many people were there. People are fine with that. Where it gets creepy is if I was able to my next door neighbor to be like, oh, I saw that you like wasted the day yesterday. It was beautiful out and you spent the whole day inside watching HGTV. You're like, whoa, like that might be true, but it's none of your business, right? Like now I feel like I'm being watched. The fact that HGTV is getting tickers for like someone being there, that's not creepy, right? But as soon as it becomes super personal and identifying my actual behavior and giving that information to someone that I don't want that information to is when it really becomes creepy, right? And finally, a reserve, and I feel like this is where the industry probably fails the most, and I don't really know what the answer is, but the reserve is the ability for you to have control, right? To you to say, yeah, like I love cats, but I don't want the world to know that I love cats, right? Like I don't want that information shared for some reason. I am shamed of that, and I want to be able to control this information. And right now, with the flow of data that's out there, I work on software systems, and it's impossible. We're a culture that is obsessed with user experience. The only way that we get good user experience is by measuring exactly how everyone is doing everything it is that they're doing, and then optimizing for a better performing system, right? Like, we want things to be faster. We want to make less clicks. We want to find things quicker. Like, that cannot be done without creating a data footprint. But how can you opt out of this, and how can you say that you don't want it, right? So if that's all what privacy is, right, then I think it's also kind of interesting to think about. I've been working in this for about 17 years now, and so how did we get from where we were to where we are? And this is the real answer, right? In my beginning days, we actually called this swivel chair integration because people who we were solving problems for were using mainframe systems. And so even if you were just doing something like making a phone order, saying I wanted my phone service set up in this house, the person who took that order would go to one system and enter in your personal information to set up an account, to get your billing going, and then they'd literally swivel their chair over to another terminal and have to re-enter all the same information to get the order people to get it going. And then they'd have to swivel their chair over to another terminal, and they'd have to do more information. So to complete this information, people were going all over the place. And like, just think about it now. Like, people complain that like they have to go to Yelp to get a restaurant recommendation and then go to OpenTable to make the reservation, right? My God, right? It's the same thing. It's the same essential problem as this. And so how we solved this is with data integration, right? We made databases. We made it easier to store data. We brought more data under the same roof. We made it possible to do more things, to take information about what I'd done in the past to help me get recommendations about what I want to do in the future. Like, that's what we all wanted. Every single sci-fi movie that you watch, when you imagine the future, you walk into the room and the lights adjust to what you want and the music plays and what you're in the mood for. Everything happens because it understands who you are. That's what we all want. Well, the only way that happens is by feeding a system information about what it is that you like, right? So, but after time, kind of all of this happens, and we started to realize, okay, maybe putting the personally identifiable information and the behavioral information in the same database is not always the best thing to do. So in most of marketing, this is how it really works, right? There's a third party, and they're the masters of, this set-top box is in this home, and this IP address is in this home, and these email addresses probably are in this home, and these phone numbers are probably in this home. And they have all the device linking of information, right? And so someone, like a cable operator, someone who works on this is what we did on the campaign, will mail their household addresses and their device IDs to this party and be like, these devices are in these houses, right? And then a campaign or brand will take their household addresses that they have, maybe it's email addresses, depending on kind of what people have. In political campaigns, we have household addresses, and these addresses match to these target groups. It could be, the target group can be hasn't voted since 2008. The target group can be, a bunch of different attributes determines that the persuadable score was high enough to whatever. But whatever these attributes are, they mail this to the third party as well. The third party then sends back to the campaigner brand the match rates. So you sent us a list of 1,000 people, and we matched 100 of them. So you make a decision there. Is that a large enough sample set for me to make further decisions on? And the third party sends back to the company that has the behavior data, right, the actual stuff that's going on, just that these device IDs now have this target information. So now in a world, like I work at Rentrak, we have all of the data on what people are watching, whether or not it's at what people, not like you, but what individuals, what devices, what movie theaters, what videos are being watched. And we have all of this information, and we have target groups, but we don't know anything about who people are, right? And this is where the line gets decided. Then it's okay to do a bunch of analysis on this information because we can now not go back and say, Jane Doe did this, right? We just know a device in this zip code did this, and our campaign said that they were persuadable, right? So at that point, you now take and you create a cube of data. And so this is all behavioral data, well, maybe not all, but all good behavioral data is usually organized by time and date. Because really what you're trying to understand is, if I'm trying to predict like stock in the future, stock prices, I look at kind of what the price was in the past, and I try to determine how things are going. So you have to organize your data to say, I'm taking a bunch of historical data from the past, and I'm going to use that information to try to help me predict things in the future. And so in 2012, we had then information about the inventory owners, who was selling stuff, right? And then within this cube, we start to fill this out, and we take things like what's the all audience size, the all audience time spent viewing, the target size viewing, so low turnout Democrats, how many of them are in this quarter hour on this day watching things, what's the price of it, what's the consistency, is it the same the last 5 Mondays, is it the same the 5 Mondays in advance, how stable is this, or is it like on a Wednesday night, people have very modelable patterns, right? They do the same thing over and over again. On a Saturday, people's schedules are all over the place on what it is that they're doing, and so it's much less reliable audience. But you can see clearly here, when you look at it, there's nothing that anyone would feel privacy invaded by their information somehow getting rolled up into this data, right? There's nothing scary about this. And so what is going on in the future, which is I still don't think is scary, right, is households' devices. So instead of having the inventory owner, you now build this cube of information, understanding all devices, whether or not it's a cell phone or a set-top box or an IP address. And instead, you take what media was consumed at that time and what was the stability score. And the major difference here is in the previous model, if I saw that on one piece of inventory, 50 people were there, and I saw in another piece of inventory that 50 people were there, I have no idea if I bought both of those things, if I got 50 people times 2 or 100 people, right? That's not my desire. Whereas in this model, I can start understanding frequency. Is this a second impression for someone? Is this a third impression for someone? Is this a fourth impression for anyone? And so the advances in this space is really about bringing this information out, not by making it more personally identifiable, right? It's still the same concept of all of the PII data is removed. And so then what kind of targeting is really done in real life? People target by date and time. They target something on Sundays. They pick, I want to target shift workers, so I'm going to target overnight time periods. I want to buy elections have lowest unit rates. So if I buy something 60 days before election day, I get a much better rate if I'm a candidate than if I buy it on day 61. So I kind of take all these things into concept. I might have a campaign that is very summer related, so I'm targeting it to air right before the summer starts, right? Whatever kind of fits. People target by inventory owner. Because there's still no master, people may believe that it exists, but it does not exist. It's all modeled in math. There is no understanding, clear and obvious and absolute without modeled math understanding of this is my TV activity, this is my Facebook activity. This, even to roll it up and be like, we know that these all came from the same devices, that doesn't exist. But it is starting to grow a little bit more, trying to figure out privacy and anonymous ways to do this. But people make decisions about where they're going to spend their budgets on different inventory types. So now we start to get a little bit more personal, right? This is where all those things, no one cares about that, it all seems normal. But we're getting to household and personal attributes, and this is where it starts to people's hairs on the back of their neck come up, and they're like, wait, do I like that, right? And so, I want to target households that are low turnout Democrats. I want to hit people in Staten Island. I want to hit people in this particular zip code. I want to target women. I want to target households that watch a lot of children's programming. I want to target households that watch less than 2 hours of TV a day. It's again still very like, if you fell into one of these buckets and you knew someone had information about the fact that you were in that bucket, I doubt very many of us would actually feel like our privacy is invaded. Nothing about this is very much different than going to a baseball game and finding out how many people showed up to that space, right? Like, it doesn't. There's ways that people with bad intentions, right? And so this is where it can cut their lists in a way that potentially they can get back information that allows them to deduce who the actual person was. So for example, if I sent a list and I said, here's 99 men and 1 woman in the list, and then and then the results that I got back happens to also say, here's the information for women and here's the information for men, well then I know the woman information is the 1 woman that was in that list, right? So situations like that can help us, and it does happen. We have car dealership records information, just like what households bought what cars. And so it's usually more hunting and pecking type of information. You need to know your own data to look at it and be like, oh, I found my data, right? I'm the only person in the state of New Jersey, like only 1 record returned for owning the 2 cars that I own. So that's clearly my record, right? This can happen. And this is where it gets really interesting, right? Addressable targeting, which doesn't exist in most places, right? You're still usually buying an IP with a particular attribute. You're still buying an ad on Dish or DirecTV that has been tagged with a specific attribute. And for some reason, we won't tell anyone who the name is. And I can argue if I have enough information to mail someone something in the mail, I don't really see the difference in me being able to send them a customized commercial on a TV. I get it feels different, right? But is it really different? And I come along the place of it's not really different, right? So hype kind of versus reality. On the Obama campaign, we built the optimizer and we spent $594 when the Romney campaign spent $66, right? So that's the hype. That's an amazing, amazing statistic point. But the reality is that KPI doesn't matter, right? I wasn't optimizing for that KPI. It just kind of happens to work out. I'm willing to pay more to get the desired frequency for my desired audience, right? This is something that I'm willing to pay more. And so this is where as a technology company that's trying to build stuff for marketers, we're focusing our energy on, right? People are willing to pay more to get the desired frequency rate for their target audience. Yeah, some people might want personally identifiable data. That's just not going to happen anytime soon. But this will happen in the 2016 cycle, right? This information will be available and people will make choices on whether or not they want to pay to be able to do this and how valuable this is to them. So it's easy for good and bad intentions to go bad. So I have just a couple of stories of things that I think, when you don't think through the whole process, how things change. So in general, things are much safer if the data lives in one place and people build APIs on top of it. So that's what Narwhal was, inherently just a large data set with an API on top of it. So very few people actually had direct access into the database, right? But they were able to answer questions about the data. Sometimes where things can go crazy is when you actually give people the data, right? And you don't really realize what is going on. So just a simple question. Who owns the fact that you and I are friends, right? If I see someone on the street and I meet them and I can be like, oh, my friend Kate, yeah, we're great friends, right? I apparently own that information because Kate wasn't there and I told someone that was true, right? So Facebook, 2012 election, had the ability for people to opt in. The Obama campaign rocked this, right? We got people to opt in, and the privacy policies at that time on Facebook were that if they opted in, they could tell us who all their friends were. Okay, so they told us who all their friends were. This is very much how local campaigns work, right? People sit in a room, it's a really small thing, all of their biggest supporters sit around the table and they circle the names of the people that they know and that they're gonna outreach to, and they figure out how to fill in the gaps of the people that they don't know. The Obama campaign just did this in a digital level, on a much larger level, but we were actually able to ingest the entire social network of the US. That's on Facebook, which is most people. Where this gets complicated is that freaks Facebook out, right? So they shut off the feature. Well, the Republicans never built an app to do that. So the data's out there. You can't take it back, right? So the Democrats have this information. So when they look at a voter file and someone comes to them, they can immediately be like, oh, here are all the other people that they know, and here are people that they can help us persuade because they're really good friends with this person. The Republicans do not have that information and will not get that information, right? Now, I'm a Democrat, so maybe I could argue that's a great thing. But really, it's not in the overall process, right? Like, that wasn't thought all the way through, and now there's a disadvantage of information that to me seems unfair. But I'm not Facebook, so this is the realities. So here's what really keeps me up at night. It's not micro-targeting. I really, I've done it for so long. I really feel like it's, for the most part, there's always sketchy situations for the most time, but most organizations that have integrity don't want to do anything that oversteps lines because that will just turn people away from them. So a lot, campaigns will self-moderate themselves more than any actual rules exist, right? But price discrimination is what keeps me up at night, right? So I don't know if you guys read an article from Chris Rock in Vox lately, but the most important part is kind of this part in white. No one has any idea what anything costs. What buying an audience costs, if I want to find out what Microsoft costs, I go to Google, I type in Microsoft, its stock price comes up, I know what I can buy it at that moment, I can see what it's sold for in the past, and I can maybe start to do some research about where I think it's going in the future. I cannot look up what HGTV costs in the New York market for next week, right? That is impossible information to find out. And there's an entire industry built around the fact that this information is secret, and the only way to get it is to pay someone else another 12% on top of what it is that you're paying for them to tell you what things cost. This again makes it harder for smaller campaigns that don't have as much money, who might have a great candidate, to participate in this process and to get their message out, because there's all of these, they can't do the work themselves. They need to bring people in to do this. And so what I can say is the best thing about Citizen United, because there's not a lot good about it, right? But the best thing about it is now that so much money is being spent in the political space, people are like, what the fuck, where's this money going, right? And so they now have public files available, and the broadcasters and the cable companies have to tell you who it is, what they sold, at what price, and when they sold it for, right? So this information is out there. We collect it all now. Yep, what happened? Uh-oh. Yeah.
We're out of time.
Oh, I thought it said 10:27.
Actually, it's going in the reverse direction. I'm really sorry.
Oh, it's going up.
Yeah, I know it's going.
Okay, well, this is my last slide, so you got it all, right? So this is the crazy thing, right? That we have no idea what anything costs, and now we can collect all of this information and we can actually expose all of this. And to me, this is the most disruptive thing going on with the big data space, is figuring out what things really cost. So that's it.